Good morning or good afternoon to everybody,
Good
depending on
morning,
part of the world you're in. We have Martin Anayi and Bob Skinstad here to talk to everybody today. I recognize plenty of names, and I know a lot of you are on these calls with us quite regularly. But for anybody who isn't, just to kind of let you know, just you can limit your questions to two per person, and then we can round up at the end if anyone wants to do any follow-ups that they didn't feel were answered. Just for today's format, we'll introduce Martin, who'll just kind of let everybody know kind of where URC is at now after 2 seasons. And then also at the start, Bob is just going to speak a little bit about his involvement with Elixir, who have just come on as a data partner to the URC. And then we are open for questions. I would just ask that anything related to Rugby World Cup, we'll do a section if there's any questions on Rugby World Cup at the end of the call, and then at the start that we are just focusing on URC. So beyond that, if I could just ask people, if you want to ask a question, if you just use the raise hand function, and then I'll call people out sort of individually and say who's next in terms of getting your questions in and stuff like that. So there we go. The call will also be recorded, so if anybody needs a copy of it afterwards, just get in touch with myself, Aoife and Shelley, and we'll make sure you get that. So there we go. And without further ado, I'll introduce Martin and Bob onto the call now.
Hi, Adam.
There we go. Hey, Martin. And there's Bob as well. Very good.
Hey, everybody.
So, Martin, if I can just ask you if you want just to give everybody on the call just a little bit of an update of where URC has got to after the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and thanks everybody for joining today. Really appreciate your time. Yeah, as Adam says, we're into season 3, which is remarkable of the United Rugby Championship. Season 2 was one we were really pleased with. It sort of exceeded our expectations. We always measure, I guess, success for a season, not just on the pitch, where we had a record amount of tries and entertainment and jeopardy in the fixtures. I think Munster went 6 games unbeaten on the road, which was incredible, winning down in Cape Town. But actually also off the field, a major part of our role at URC is to grow the entertainment side of the business, the fan side of the business, and that's something that's been really pleasing. Attendances were up considerably. We went over 10,000 average per game for the first time ever in the competition's history, including Pro 12 and all other names before it. Our TV audiences were really up as well. In fact, we had a record the previous season. We matched and slightly improved that last season with 37 million cumulative audience, which was, again, really pleasing to see that growth after the first year. One of the key metrics we also look at is sort of fan social media growth, and again that clicked over the 1 million mark for the first time ever, and that puts us as the highest growth league in World Rugby, which we're incredibly proud about, but actually shows that there's a really great club rugby fan base growing, which is really important at this point in time. We've been lucky enough to work with the likes of Bob on Elixir coming in as a data partner into the league. It's super important. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that. But that supplements a really healthy bed of great commercial partners. We've never had such breadth of support before, and we're really pleased about that. So I think all the key health metrics that we look at and we monitor and collect data on in a season are all trending up, and we like to think that sort of supports the fact that the competition on the pitch was absolutely outstanding. So really pleased about season 2 and can't wait for season 3 to kick off.
Thanks, Martin. And Bob, if you can just let everybody know a little bit about Elixir's partnership with URC, and then we can kick off into the questions.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, and thanks everyone. Yeah, we're absolutely delighted. As a lot of you know, I work in my non-rugby time as a consultant for a listed entity called Elixir, and we're a consultancy that does everything that consultants do, particularly competing with the big four. But we've had a recent focus on data and analytics. Obviously, with my work in the URC, the growing commercial strength of the URC and the rugby strength of the URC, it's made a lot of sense for us to align ourselves. I know Martin and the management team and some of their short, medium, and long-term goals and where they want to go, and we're delighted to be on that journey with them. I think it's a fantastic platform for us to show the kind of work that we can do in business. We've got a burgeoning sports practice, but what we'll be doing with the URC is we'll be aligning our data and consulting strengths with not only on-field analysis of the insights and data that are produced by Oval Insights and certainly by the URC themselves, but we'll also be looking at the health and hygiene of the league in general and the teams themselves, allowing the URC to sort of consistently work with the teams to improve not only net new revenue areas, but also operational efficiencies and building themselves to be or to continue fulfilling their position as the best growing rugby league in the world, onwards and upwards. So super excited about it. There are separate announcements, and you can have a look. I've got some on my LinkedIn page or on the Elixir website, or I'm happy to chat individually about it. That's not what today is about, because it's about the URC and the strength of the URC in general, but it's something that we're particularly excited about.
Thanks so much for that, Bob. We'll just kick off. See the hands raised, which is great. So Simon Thomas, followed by David Kelly, just to get us going.
Hi, Martin. How are you? Nice to see you again. And
Hi, Simon.
Bobby, hi, mate.
Good, thanks.
You've announced today as an organisation, Martin, about the return to meritocracy for Champions Cup qualification. I mean, you obviously talked about that before. How much thought had to go into that? Because, I mean, I suppose in theory, you could end up with just two countries rather, represented, given that perhaps the strength, if you look at Ireland and South Africa. So what were the pros and cons behind making that decision?
Yeah, so it's a really good point, Simon, and yeah, a lot of discussion went into it, as I think it's been well documented. We did a review after 2 years, so we had previously a split system where we had 4 qualifiers from the regional pools and then the next 4 from the league. It was said at the time that actually we entered into that on a split decision, and we said that we would do a review after 2 seasons. And should that review not be unanimous to continue, we would revert to meritocracy. We've sort of been here slightly before. If you remember, Simon, we had meritocracy return from the Pro 12 days, where we moved, I think it was 2017, Adam might correct me, but where we moved to straight meritocracy. And I think that really improved not only the Champions Cup, but actually the integrity of the league at that stage too, because we weren't qualifying teams, on the basis of their country. We were qualifying them on the basis of their league position. So we reverted back to that methodology and that theory. If that theory is true, then we will see even more competition in URC 3. Every game counts, every game matters, and that's got to be good for the league. We weigh that up against representation, your point around how many countries will we see. That we had 8 qualifiers all go through last season to the knockouts, Ospreys being, if you like, the 8th qualifier out of that, beating the French and the English champions away from home. So I think we've got a really incredible depth to our league. Our competition committee, which is called the Sports and Regulatory Committee, met, and they felt actually we should rely on that depth. We should rely on that strength in the league and move back to a meritocracy. So we've done that post-review. And actually, there's a lot to get excited about in that, because, as I say, I think that will drive competition even further into the league. But a lot of discussion, a lot of review, and ultimately the sporting committee and the board agreed to move back to meritocracy, and I believe EPCR are very happy about that move, actually.
Cheers. Apologies if this has already been reported. I've not seen it. It was obviously suggested earlier in the summer that Viaplay were pulling out of the UK market or scaling back their coverage. So can you clarify exactly what the situation will be about where the URC will be covered, what channels, certainly in the UK?
No, so you're right that there was an announcement. We clarified that announcement. So we have 2 seasons left, this season and next season. So there are no issues at all. Viaplay is a listed company, and we have that, guarantee. So sort of commercially, financially, no issues. What they're looking at Viaplay now is to partner in the UK. They've had and sort of well documented investments into the company in recent times. They're, as I say, a listed company, and we're pretty positive about the partnership that will emerge from that. They have been an incredible partner through when they're Premier Sports right into today. Very involved, very integral to the business, and will continue to be so. Alongside our free-to-air partners, we've got an incredible stable of broadcast partners. So there are no issues.
And lastly, if you mean, Martin, we've obviously seen the bunker system in the World Cup, which is, been an innovation there. Are you going to have something similar in the RC? And what's your kind of yellow card, red card process going to be for the coming season?
Yeah, again, we're looking at that. We're obviously integrally involved through Tapper Henning, who's our head of match officials. We're looking and reviewing that process through the Rugby World Cup. We're working with EPCR to try and make sure that we're aligned, so you're not going from one system to another system. I suspect you'll see something similar. It won't be for this season, because actually we're in the midst of about to kick it off. But I imagine you'll see something very similar probably next season for URC. We'll take the learnings from World Rugby. There's a body that reports back how they think it went and how it can be replicated at league level. There are obviously cost issues because we run 151 games a year, so it's a bit of a different beast, the Rugby World Cup. But we'll look to make sure that we've got an appropriate standard within the league as well.
Cheers, Martin. All the best this season. Thanks again.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Simon. Over to David, and followed by Moreno, and then Rob. Dave Kelly. Okay. Moreno.
Hi, good morning from Italy. Ciao.
Sorry, I'll come back.
Okay, I will leave to him.
Yeah, sorry, Martin. Sorry, I was just fiddling with my screen. Good to see you all. It's actually a vague doubling down of Simon's question there on the meritocracy, obviously, which we knew about in May when we spoke to you.
Yeah.
And possibly just reiterating concerns. Well, obviously, some will welcome it for obvious reasons. There are concerns with Italy, the way their under-age system has gone, their World Cup efforts, the struggles they have. And obviously, with deference to Simon, the Welsh struggles as well, that there could be fears of a 2-tier system, which obviously we see in international rugby, which hasn't served that well. I mean, is that something that you're worried about, despite the merits of meritocracy? And also, again, in a world of ongoing reviews about reviews, will there be a review of this, or is that an ongoing thing? Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Yeah. Look, I think, and actually Marino is next, so I think we'll have a comment on this too. But actually, I think from an Italian rugby point of view, there's 2 parts to that question. I'd say, one, Benetton have been incredible, right? And I think they've got 22 to 24 internationals in their squad. I know that sort of key ingredient is for Zebre to get stronger. We've seen that they didn't win a game last year. We can't beat around the bush, right? So we've got a team at the top and a team at the bottom, and actually the core in between has been incredibly strong. When you have knockout rugby, you see the likes of Munster come all the way through, and I think that's the jeopardy that we like as a league. What we need to do is help Italy get stronger, we need to help Zebre to improve. I know they've invested more money this season than they did last season in players to bring players back. But we need to help because actually at the moment there's too much emphasis on Benetton perhaps to be strong throughout the competition. But if they lose so many players to international camp, that causes a strain. So we're helping the Italian Federation. In fact, Elixir and Bob will be key to innovation and think tank, high performance think tank that we're setting up. And part of the question that we're going to be posing to that think tank is how do we improve in a league competition where you don't have relegation? How do you improve the teams towards the bottom end to be more competitive? So we've taken that task to heart, and we're trying to put in place that process to see what we can come up with to make them more competitive. And that might be, for example, leveling the playing field around analytics. That could be leveling the playing field around recruitment of the best possible talent. So that's what we and the board have said that's really important for us to do, and that's to improve the league from 16 upwards. In Wales, I know that they've had a really good World Cup. Actually, got some great. I mean, the likes of your Jack Morgan's coming through. We knew what he can do from an Ospreys point of view. Dowie Lake. You got Mason Grady coming through. You got real talent coming through that I think actually serves Welsh rugby in really good stead. I know they've got a new funding model. I know they've got a new CEO coming in. Abby Turney comes in, I think, in December. So there's a lot of things in Wales I think we can point to feel confident that performances will improve. And as I say, 1 to 8 in the URC qualified on merit for the knockout stages in last year's Champions Cup. In fact, every team in the URC qualified other than Zebre for the playoffs in both competitions last year. So we want that to continue. We want that to improve, but it's something we're very conscious of for the reasons you point out. The meritocracy does make it more important for us to help those teams towards the bottom end to get stronger.
And just briefly, again, just for a sentence, like, is there a review in a couple of years, maybe, because meritocracy might look great for, Irish South African if they get stronger and stronger. But if the weak do not get stronger, I mean, certainly, it's good for certain people, but it's not good for a broader kind of competitive sporting spread. So will it be looked at again if there are issues? Is there ongoing reviews, basically?
Yeah, I'd say, we would never say never to a review, but there isn't, like last time, if you remember, we said that there's going to be a review in 2 years' time. We're not saying that this time, but, I'd never say never, but I think there's nothing slated for us to review in the future at this time.
Thanks, Dave. Moreno?
Again, ciao from Italy. I think Dan probably spoiled a couple of the questions I would have asked. So Sky Italia is the first year that we're going to broadcast it, but we have seen obviously from outside. And going back to Zebre and the Italian situation, is there anything you are not asking but willing from, so especially Zebre, in order to, I'm mixing a couple of questions, to maintain maybe their place into the tournament? There were rumors saying that there were pushes also from the outside, and the Black Lion is not a secret, is going to be in the Challenge Cup. Is there any clarification, maybe it's not even needed, about this at the moment? And what have you asked, or what are you hoping from the Italian side?
Yeah, there's no question the Italian Federation is a shareholder in our competition, and we'll have 2 teams in our league. In fact, I met with Marcio Innocente, Marino knows as the president of the Italian Federation, only a couple of weeks ago in Paris. And we sat down to discuss how do we more integrally support them to push for the competition in Italy to improve. And what we decided to do was sort of twofold. One, I sort of already mentioned, working with Bob and Elixir and a really smart people Elixir has to help us come up with ideas alongside some really high intelligent rugby IQ head coaches, high performance directors in each of our unions, to come up with ways that we can increase the performance and help increase the performance. Because I think by the time we help with Zebre and the Italian performance improves overall in URC, that's only good for the international game. I think it's only good for Six Nations rugby and ultimately for future World Cups. So we're really keen to do that. We've got support to do that. I think the other side is to help, the Italian Federation look within Italy and outside for investment in their rugby programs. And that's something that we are looking to do in conjunction with the Italian Federation to help support Italian rugby with inward investment. And that's something we're really keen to do. There are really great businesses within Italy who want to support rugby, and we need to be able to show them, collectively that there's a project for them to be involved in that will support the game nationally and internationally.
Two more questions. So the first one is there is no an idea to make the number of team bigger or the participants different. I was talking about Black Lion, for example. Not at the moment. No, we've supported Black Lions at EPCR because, again, for Georgian rugby, it's important that they've got a place for professional club rugby, and that is we've been lucky enough to support them and be successful in them coming into the Challenge Cup, as you've seen. But the same with the Cheetahs. Bob, did you play for the Cheetahs before? I don't know if you did, but you definitely played for the Cats. I remember that, the joint venture.
Played for the Cats. I wasn't lucky enough to be based only out of Bloemfontein.
Yeah, there you go. And in fact, we've managed to support the Cheetahs to rebase themselves out of Amsterdam for the Challenge Cup games as well. So again, that's our commitment to keep supporting the teams that have supported us. And the Cheetahs, if you remember, were a key part of the Pro 14 expansion. So that's the level of our support to date for those two teams.
And last question, and please don't get me wrong, it's not a criticism or anything. We were talking about meritocracy in order to qualify for the Champions Cup and so increase maybe the level of the tournament in general. Let's take away Premiership with the problems from the economical side that they had. But how can you compare, for example, your this competition, the URC, for example, against the top 14, and measuring only maybe in the European Cups is not something that is, I'm not saying too easy for the URC because of the level of the intensity of the championship. And if yes, are there any other measure in order to increase the potential visibility and the idea a person have for the URC?
Well, we need your help. I mean, thankfully, Sky Sports is on board in Italy. I think it's a really important area for us to grow. It's probably not had a stable home for long enough in Italy to grow, and we hope we've got that now with Sky Sports' help. In terms of the intensity of the league, it's a really hard thing to measure objectively across different competitions. Our job is to put sort of meaningful games in front of teams and let them go at it at a time where they've got the best representation for their international players. So we don't play off international weekends. So the way we've gone about that is, I hope, to look forward and say, actually, the international game and the club game do need to separate ever so slightly to give each other space within the calendar. And that should be good overall for rugby and good for fandom. So if one of the metrics for growth and for how successful a league is the growth of the fandom, then we're the fastest growing league in European rugby. And at the moment, that's all we can do. I mean, objectively, we can ask the teams to compete in Europe against the French and do well, and they've done that. Off the field, we can only measure what we can measure and rank it, if you like, against the other leagues, and so far so good in terms of how we stack up. They're still the biggest. They're still averaging around 14,000 per game, but they're also the oldest, and they've got rivalries that stretch back many years, and we're building those rivalries. But we feel like we're maybe growing, and hopefully over the years we'll meet that challenge head on, and we're having a different conversation in a few years' time, where maybe we've grown up a little bit.
That's Martin. That's Bob, and looking forward to work with you.
Love it. Yeah, look forward to it, Marino.
Nathan, followed by William, and then Brandon.
Thank you very much. Good day, Martin and Bob. I just got two questions. We see another clash in fixtures, but now the Rugby World Cup with the opening rounds of the URC's third season. Martin, is it still a work in progress to avoid postponed or fixture clashes, which could potentially affect ticket sales and other avenues moving forward?
Yeah, definitely it's a work in progress. I think it's something really keen to try and avoid where possible. And I think Rugby World Cup is that anomaly every 4 years where, just aren't enough weekends in the year really for the rugby that we've got. We try and make the most of it, quite honestly. I think the rugby played over the weekend was exceptional at the Rugby World Cup, and a lot of our players are in that. I think we have around 300 internationals in our league, about 100 plus represented at the World Cup. So it's right for us not to play throughout the World Cup or before. We've tried that. We're now going to play. Sorry, you can see me. We're now going to play in the weekend coming, and that was probably a compromise to get playing, but not to have too many of those overlaps. You're right; it's a work in progress, absolutely, and we're trying to refine it every year.
Then lastly, Martin, regarding player welfare, in terms of the fixtures and taking into consideration the international fixtures moving forward, how are you guys able to take players' welfare into consideration when scheduling fixtures? Because we see the South African teams will be traveling less, which is a positive for the players, of course.
Yeah, that was a big one from the South African teams, and we responded to that. This is the work in progress piece, definitely. So we're doing 2 trips this year, a 4 and a 2. Next year, we hope there to be a 3 and a 3, but we need the EPCR, if you like, to buy into that also, because every weekend is placed and planned out. So we feel like it's better from last season to this season. We've made that an improvement. We want to make that better again the following season, and we continue to work on making sure that the South African teams are treated fairly, are treated with the right high performance conditions in place, and hopefully we'll see that improve year on year.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Over to William, followed by Brandon, and then Philip.
Good morning. Good morning from Galway, Martin. Just something that has struck me: the Sharks are now sponsored by a betting organisation. They're going to be carrying a lot of advertising. They may also be using that as a part of their brand name. Have you any concerns about that, considering in the UK and possibly here in Ireland, there's going to be much stricter controls on betting advertising? And how do you think it is a look for the URC organisation?
Yeah, a really good question. It's something we're constantly challenged with. We've had betting partners in the league before, if you remember, and sport has sort of leaned quite heavily on the betting industry. We realise its position and its discussion around pros and cons of that. In fact, we've got a CEOs group tomorrow, which is the club CEOs group, and it's on that agenda specifically. What is our position as a collective on sports betting? There are quite strict rules for me to apply to my team, which maybe don't apply to other leagues. We have a straight veto right of any club within our league or any shareholder of our league for any betting deal that we bring to the table. So, it's unlike every other category. For that reason, it's flagged as being incredibly sensitive. In Italy, it's banned. Sports betting is banned. Sports advertising of the betting industry is banned. So we already have one territory where it's impossible to do deals, if you like. So it's a constant review, and in fact tomorrow is the start of our club CEO review of that policy. So it is front and center of our minds.
Okay, and the second one is slightly linked to the World Cup, but it's really if, say, South Africa win it or they reach the final, is that a more of a positive that you can build on URC, that's the league that most of their players are going to operate in going forward? And how do you see that affecting how the fan base in South Africa continues to grow? Because these players are now playing. I appreciate some of them are playing abroad, but you know, in time to come, they should, more and more of them should be in URC situations.
Yeah, I mean, we're incredibly proud that in the Ireland-South Africa game, you know, we had sort of 80% of the field was URC players, if you like. And that's world number one versus world number two at that point, I think. So, you know, if South Africa go on and do well, that's great for our league, quite honestly. You know, we champion that. We love them doing well. I mean, we are made up really of union shareholders. And for us to be able to provide a league where teams can be successful at the international level, that's very much part and parcel of what this league is there to do. Its raison d'etre is to you know, provide a platform for the very best players in the world, and if they can go on and be successful for their country, then I think we've had a good day at the office.
I might just
ask. Thank you for your time.
I might just ask Bob to add to that as well. Just Bob, just the ability of, you know, if South Africa were to win the World Cup, just how that impacts clubs in South Africa from a week-to-week basis and the appeal of going to rugby.
Look, I mean, and thank you. I mean, I won't add too much. Just the fact that the URC has already added to the number of players that are playing their, let's call it their domestic rugby, in a league that is showcased around the world has already helped South Africa. It's already helped, you know, the coaching team to see strength v strength in those areas. And then the URC, with the increasing rugby strength that we see every year, the rivalries are increasing, the number of players in positions, key positions for South Africa are increasing. It gives them an amazing ability to you know, test and watch players. Now, suddenly, if South Africa do well in a World Cup, and I don't think there's a South Africa in the world that says there's any guarantee of us getting close to winning a World Cup, but we'll give it a red hot go. I think a lot of the fans will say, well, look at the number of players we've got available in each position. And a lot of that is attributable to the number of players that have been playing in the URC. So hugely positive to have teams playing in the URC. Yes, it is a north-south rivalry and their, you know, travel, etc., affected. But we've also mentioned over the sort of course of the last 6 weeks or so is that a lot of the coaches are starting to adapt and understand how that travel is changing. The evolution of travel for sport is changing. It's not squeeze travel into my 5-day week. It's, you know, let's squeeze our 5-day week into our travel schedule because we need to be playing games in certain parts of the world. So it's a huge positive. Everybody's embracing it and wants it to work.
Thanks, Bob. Next is Brandon, followed by Philip, and then Stephen.
Thank you. Hi, Martin and Bob. Thank you for having me. Martin, with your Martin, with your point on the URC that the club rugby fan base is growing and in line with the goals of being the best growing rugby league, to gauge the strengths of the URC against our peers at club level, what are your views on a global tournament between champions of Super Rugby Americas, MLR, URC, Top 14, Gallagher Prem, Japan Rugby League 1, and Super Rugby Pacific down the line? Thanks.
So that's a lot of competitions right there. Look, there is a discussion around the Club World Cup, and you know, my personal position on that has been we've got great things happening at the Champions Cup. We've got Investec coming in as a partner. We're going to go back to meritocracy, as we talked about. You know, anybody that was there in Dublin for the La Rochelle game. That is something that it's not even sort of subordinate to the international game. It's different. It's colourful. It's totally bonkers and loud and noisy, and we should embrace that. That difference is an incredible part of our club ecosystem. I think there are a few clubs around the world who can challenge that level, that quality. I also think there's a long way to go for other competitions that you talked about to be anywhere near that level, quite honestly. But if there's a roadmap to the globalization of the club game, we're quite keen to see that and to be involved in it. And it may well be that it's a playoff game versus winner versus winner of Super Rugby or something like that, just to kind of whet the appetite and see what could be. What's that prospect look like? I do think it's different to football, isn't it? That actually we've probably still got the conditions where the likes of the Crusaders, can hold claim to be the best team in the world. In football, that best team in the world is usually a European-based team playing in the Champions League. So that might be the one area for us to look at rugby as a point of difference versus football, where you still have the ability to have, a team from New Zealand, Australia, or indeed Japan in the future being competitive and winning the title of the best club team in the world. So we're keen to explore it. That will be done via the EPCR. So EPCR, for those who don't know, is the organising body of the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup. They're in discussions with Super Rugby and SANZAR about what that competition could look like. But we'd be supportive of that in the right guise at the right time. At the moment, though, we're very much focused on URC Season 3 and ultimately the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup. And there are additions, which I've already mentioned, of the Challenge Cup, with Georgia coming in, with the extension of the Cheetahs into that competition. We'd like to see, we've seen Portugal do amazingly well at the World Cup. Spain should have been at the World Cup. We've had near misses with Germany over the years. So perhaps for us as a European based competition, EPCR can look at developing those markets as well as South Africa. And we will support and liaise with the other competitions around the world via World Rugby or through SANZAR. We'll continue to do that. So we're keen to see the world club game, if you like, develop. But there's a fairly sizable competition here that all our teams are in to win.
Nice one. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Just going to go to Stephen, followed by Harley, and then Rob.
Sorry, I that wasn't me.
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
No worries. Hi, Martin. Hi, Bob. Hope you're both doing well. Just looking ahead to the Sharks and Ospreys, is the URC kind of keen to expand on those sort of exhibition matches, tapping into expat markets, possibly even in North America with the Irish market there with Munster, Leinster, or Connacht, Ulster? Is that something that the URC might look at expanding into? And I know in Stellenbosch, on a slightly different way, it was more like a varsity cup sort of night down there when the Stormers were playing. Are these sort of things that the URC is interested in exploring?
Yeah, that London game is actually interesting because when our teams play in football stadiums, and occasionally we get the situation where there just isn't facilities available in our own country, we were lucky enough to reach out to Quins and to our colleagues in PRL who we share offices with, and ultimately RFU, and everybody agreed, on the basis that we haven't got a venue to play that game in, let's look at a game in London. That was felt to be a very sort of additive and collegiate exercise to grow the audiences. I was actually at the Springboks New Zealand game at Twickenham in the warm-ups, packed trains of South Africans coming up from Kent, actually our audience is there, and we're quite keen to sort of tap into that in the right way with the right sort of support from our nearest and dearest, both at the RFU but also Premiership Rugby. The US has always been an interesting one. We've always received lots of interest of taking our games to that market. We've never pressed go on it to date because the games that tend to sort of attract the most interest, you mentioned that sort of Leinster, Munster, that's our season ticket, absolute regular. And if we took that out of market, I think that's it's a really challenging thing to do for our clubs. But we're interested in the market, and so are our clubs. So our clubs and our unions do lots of strategic partnerships in the US. There's a lot of affinity both for the Irish in the US, but increasingly more for South Africa. One of our owners, Marco Massotti, is a South African, New York-based lawyer who owns the Sharks. So there are lots of ties, if you like, and connections to the US, but we want it to be strategic. We want to do it in line with our unions, and we want to make sure that we were doing it with World Rugby in mind too, because they've got a road to 2031 World Cup there, and they don't want it to be haphazard as to who goes and plays in the market. They want it to be strategic, and we'd fully support that, but we just haven't found the right opportunity to date.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Philip. Apologies for jumping ahead there.
No problem.
No problem. Stephen Nell next, please.
Guys, hope you guys are well.
Yeah, good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Bob, as a former captain, and someone's captained at the highest level, I'd be interested to know what do you think the effect will be when you take a big personality like Stephen Kitshoff out of a team, like would be happening now with the Stormers. Ori's also going, but obviously Kitshoff has got that immense quality as a leader. So what is the immediate effect, and how do the Stormers kind of deal with that?
Thanks, Stephen. I mean, I think it's a great question. You get people who have effect on the field, and you get people who have effect off the field, and you get people who have both. And I think Stephen Kitshoff is one of those guys. I think he'll be a great addition to any team that he goes to, but he'll be a big loss in any team that he leaves. I think the one thing that is difficult to measure here is where and how will he make an impact quickly on the ground where he goes. I mean, we're also seeing Siya Kolisi leaving, and he's going to the French league. So it's about the teams that are dealing with it best. What you don't want is a proliferation of great leaders, but people are not getting anything done on the field. So the Stormers are going to have to, for me, they're going to have to address the on-field negativity. They've got good backups in the scrum area, but they've got a guy who's got Springboks presence for a number of years now, Springbok leadership, and brings a lot to it. I know it's a concern on the field, but certainly one that they'll be planning for. For me, especially with the URC, you leave you let one South African leaves an Ulster, like a Dwayne Vermeulen, another one joins an Ulster. So there's certainly a little braai shop on the corner that'll be pleased that there's another big man coming in to consume the same meat that Dwayne's not going to be having. But in serious terms, it is a big void to fill, and he's such a wonderful player and contributor to the game that I think they'll have to be looking at it very seriously.
Martin, we've had an interesting development in South Africa where a few billionaires bought into the Boland Rugby Union, which neighbours Western Province, and it's a very fertile ground in terms of talent in South Africa. So the immediate there's a lot of ambitious talk coming immediately that they want to join the URC in due course, but obviously that's practically the practicalities to that. I mean, the URC can't just take another team on board. So how would that work? Would that be for the South African Rugby Union internally to decide at the end of the day which four they would nominate, or is there an avenue into European competition for ambitious teams like that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. My understanding of that's a little bit sketchy, if I'm honest, but I remember reading about the investment and thought it was a good investment at the time because it was actually in an area which provided a lot high performance players into the other ranks. So I thought that was a interesting development within the confines, if you like, of URC. We've been very clear of the 4 teams that are in the URC, and that doesn't change. So any development, I guess, for Boland as a provincial union outside of where they sit today is a matter for SARI, to be honest. But we're really keen to see growth and private investment within South African rugby, and we've seen that with Western Province as well, which we're very supportive of. So I can only see that being a good thing for South African rugby, quite honestly.
And then just lastly from me, Martin, I think last year, I think it might have been at the end of the tournament when we spoke about the travel challenges that the South African teams had. And I think there were some initiatives spoken of in terms of making the logistics better. I'm not sure whether it was as airline bookings or I just recall us having this conversation, and I think there was something in the pipeline. Can you just tell us, what has transpired?
Yeah, probably the main development from last season to this season. So last season we had the airline deal, and that provided sort of cost alleviation to the union to book those flights for South African teams. This season is much more about structurally we've changed to 2 tours rather than 3 or 4. That was at the request of the South African union and the franchises, supported by everybody else, to say, yes, look, this is right, to try and make that travel easier, so to speak. That's probably the main shift from last season to this season, is to reduce the amount of tours down, and to allow the teams a bit more time to bed in, play the games, and then shoot back to South Africa. So I think that's the main change from year to year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Just go to Harley, followed by Rob, and then Ashfaq.
Hi. You guys might not be the best people to answer this one, but with regards to next season's European champ qualification, are you pushing for better fares? So at the moment, 80% of the Premiership teams go through the Challenge Cup, but only Champions Cup, and only half of the URC teams. Is there any talks to rebalance that?
No, I mean, so we've looked at format at EPCR, and that continues to happen. We've made some changes at EPCR to move back to the group stages. I think you've probably seen that. We get 8 qualifiers. There hasn't been any discussion to change the amount of qualifiers per league, no. But certainly off 28 and 24 teams, we're
Lastly, I remember last season there was talks about a women's league. Has there been any more movement on the potential of a women's URC?
Yeah, actually, so we've done an internal due diligence process, which has shown that there is potential for us to do more in that space. We are talking to our unions now, who ran a Celtic challenge, to see how we grow that with them. Would they want us to support them in that? We talk constantly with our unions about that, and if there's a role for us to play, we'd be happy to play it. But at the moment, it's a Celtic challenge. I know that in South Africa, the Bulls have heavily invested in the women's program. I know that for example, EPCR are looking at a women's competition as well. So again, what's our role within that? We need to be strategic. We're talking to World Rugby about windows and things like that. We don't want to just sort of suddenly plonk in a league competition that is either A, unsustainable, or B, cuts across what our unions are already doing at World Rugby, and where our existing players already play, and a lot of them play in England, in the professional league in England. So everything we need to do needs to be very joined up in the women's game, and maybe learn some of the lessons learned from the men's game, not sort of plonk new competitions in. We've got to make sure it all works together and hangs together properly.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harley. Rob Cole, followed by Ashfaq.
Martin, it's great to see more meritocracy coming in on the field. How is the meritocracy going to be governed financially? So if Wales or Scotland or Italy don't get any qualifiers to the Champions Cup, will they get less money than the Irish and the South Africans? Or how is your apportionment going to be moving forward?
Yeah, so we actually just distribute per club. We don't distribute sort of with extra meritocracy payments or anything like that. EPCR actually removed meritocracy payments a few years back of those qualifying for the later stages. We have in fact got sort of incentives for our teams to go further in our competition and go further in EPCR competition with share of gate, and then prize money within URC. But we try and make sure as far as we can that actually we don't make worse any discrepancies off field with payments. And that's a really tricky thing to do, to have reward for doing well, at the same time not sort of rewarding the haves and taking money away from those who need it most, actually, which is those who have struggled to perform in that year. So that's a constant balance to try and get right, I think, in any professional sport. But at large, for the most part, our distributions are per club. They're not based on meritocracy.
Thanks, Rob. And Ashfaq?
Thank you. Bob and Martin. Bob,
So
firstly, just to you, can you hear me?
Got you. I can hear you.
Clear.
Okay, cool.
Will you get less?
I don't know if there's someone else talking, but okay. Bob, just in terms of the South African teams, obviously you would have been delighted with the Stormers having reached the finals 2 years in a row. But just in terms of the Sharks and the Bulls, what do you expect from them this time around? I know the Bulls have also invested in quite a few players coming in this season, and with the Sharks having lost Sia, but they've also got quite a strong lineup and a new coach in John Plumtree.
Yes, they have. They've invested heavily in the future. I think the Sharks are, certainly under the new ownership group, are looking to underpin the strength that they've had in the past, but then also, be more international focused about how they want to play this kind of rugby, where they want to play the rugby. They've got some promotional tours planned. They've got quite a few things that I think would align quite heavily with where the URC wants their sort of star teams and star players to be looking and feeling like they're sort of co-promoting the game of rugby. So I think they'll do well. I've got great respect for John Plumtree as a coach. I've played under him, and he's a detail man, but he's also a big picture thinker. And I think the Bulls very similarly are competitive. They've been domestic champions in and around South Africa for a long time across a number of competitions. So they'll be hurting that their performance last year wasn't necessarily where they would like it to be. They also have stumped for some international players coming back. They've got some senior leadership, but they also want to, I think, look at how does the future affect their pool of players, their development of players coming through an incredible school system in and around the Pretoria Basin, but also around South Africa, and how can they get those players to buy into being European players in a domestic competition. And that's the key, is people who want to live and earn in South Africa, but have the international exposure that's good enough and at a high enough quality level, like the URC has proved to be, to make sure you've got a real chance at being picked for the national team.
Cool, thanks, Bob. And Martin, just one for you in terms of the meritocracy situation. Do you think that could now also lift the standards of the other regions? Because obviously, I think the Welsh team qualified just because they were regional champions kind of thing last season. But just in terms of Wales particularly, and also Italy.
Yeah, I think that's the hope, isn't it? That actually meritocracy drives performance and drives meaning into every game. To be honest, I'm not sure that they weren't trying every game or there wasn't meaning every game last season. I think it's a nice thing for us to gravitate towards, and who knows whether it's that last 1%. That's certainly the theory, is to drive jeopardy, to drive competition throughout the league, and to drive meaning to every game. And you know, I think historically, when we went to meritocracy in 2017, we actually saw an improved performance from Benetton, for example. So you know, maybe history tells us that could well happen again.
Thank you. Just Rob Cole.
Yeah, I think Rob had a question.
Rob, you had a follow-up.
Yes, sorry, my thing dropped out. You talked earlier on about being close to Premier Rugby. There are some drums beating that we might see an amalgamation in the not too distant future, and that Europe will go. When you look into the future, what do you see?
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly from our perspective, we see URC growing from strength to strength. I see us getting that depth really great from a competition point of view. I see Wales coming really strong. And I've sort of been on record saying this before. I think we get our interactions with the French and the English competition through the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup. And if we can improve those competitions, make the group stages even better, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the playoffs. And I think if we can get that from round 1 to 4 in the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup, then we've got a pretty good mix of league competition and cup competition, because those have two different sort of, they're integrally different, I think, and they've got something different to offer. So I can't see that in the short run. You know, again, who knows in the future, but certainly for what I can foresee, we've got an amazing growth story in URC that continues, and we've got an amazing sort of turnaround of making the Champions Cup great again, and I think that's now coming to fruition.
So the interesting point recently here in Wales is that the union turns over the 4th highest amount of money of any union in the world, but it's about 20 million a year short. Your turnover has improved, but you're still well short of where you need to be to feed 16 mouths. I mean, your costs have risen dramatically with the expansion. When do you think you might be at a place where financially you can affect the league, rather than, with no disrespect to Bob and his team, offering something around the fringes?
Well, I know. I mean, I'm not sure that's strictly true. Actually, we've increased our turnover threefold in the last 8 years. We are now just shy of where the Premiership is in terms of turnover. Our growth trajectory is steeper, and every statistic that we measure, whether that's attendance, audience growth, TV audience growth, is trending up. So I don't think we should be doing ourselves a disservice and saying we're not already there, to be honest, against the Premiership. I think we are.
Yeah, but it's not against the Premiership. You've got 4 more or 6 more teams over last season to feed than they have, and you've got huge differences in your travel. They're restricted to one area. I mean, you need more money to feed more mouths.
Not actually, because our unions own our clubs and have a different relationship with our clubs than the English do. So actually, the ecosystem that we provide our clubs is already more sustainable, because the RFU doesn't have that same relationship with the Premiership clubs. It's a different economic system and structure. So we don't actually need to provide like for like or more revenue from a league than the Premiership does for our clubs to have more to play with.
When will the next round of TV deals be? And if you're predicting with all the upsurge here, how much percentage increase might you be looking for that?
So we are 2 seasons away from renewal. All of our broadcasters want to renew, which is a good place to be in. And yeah, those percentages increase. There's a lot that goes into that in terms of the growth of our data since we started the term to when it will kick in, to growth across all the metrics I just talked about. And we believe it will go up. To how much and to what degree, I think that's for those discussions, and we'll announce that in due course. I wouldn't want to prejudice that in any way.
Thank you. We're all looking forward to this weekend.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Hey guys, I'm just conscious we've run over the hour mark. There's one question left, which is Mubin. Mubin, if I just ask you to limit it to one question, please.
Yes. Hi, Bob. Hi, Martin. Bob, just a question for you as a former Stormers player. Do you feel the Stormers can win 2 trophies this upcoming season? When I say 2 trophies, I mean the URC and also the Investec Heineken Cup Champions Cup as well. Given that the union's now obviously not under admin anymore, and also they've gained a lot of Springbok players as well. Warwick Galander's back, Kitshoff's back, and also we've seen that a lot of the Stormers box are doing well in the World Cup at the moment. So, do you feel that they'll have the squad and the belief to win 2 trophies this season?
That's a very big call. I think they'll have a great squad, and I think they'll have a great chance in every game. But for me to now think that they're suddenly going to pick up 2 trophies in 2 very difficult competitions overnight is stretching it a bit. I think they'll do very, very well. I think they'll be incredibly competitive. I think the new structure, as I understand it, will allow them to be a lot more streamlined and a lot more operationally efficient, which is so important these days. There'll be much less stress on the management team to just survive day to day. They'll be able to actually coach rugby as a priority, which they haven't been able to do for 3 years. And in that sense, their ability or their results have just shown their ability. And I think they will do very well. To predict that they're going to have 2 wins in a row would be silly, but I certainly wish them all the very best.
That's great. Thank you, Mubin. I'm conscious I did promise everybody at the start that we would make some space for some World Cup questions. But we are very tight on time, but we might be able to squeeze in 1 or 2 if anyone did have them. But if not, I think that might be. So I see Stephen and Nathan straight up with their hands. Bob, can we borrow you just for another minute or 2 just to speak to Stephen and Nathan?
Yeah, no problem. I've got about 12 eyes looking at me and around the corner here, but that's fine. Let's go for it. We get it out the way now.
Very quickly. Thank you. Stephen, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Bob, the obvious question is, how do you see the semi-finals going? I mean, it's I think the perception is among many people is that the semi-finals were actually played during the quarterfinals. The 2 games between the All Blacks in Ireland and Springboks in France. Do you think that there's any chance possibly of an upset in the semi-finals? And then just your general thoughts on the Springboks, please.
Sure. I mean, I was incredibly lucky to be at both of those games. I can say 2 things. One, probably 2 of the best rugby games I've ever seen in my entire life. Back to back, I thought Ireland, New Zealand couldn't be topped, and then South Africa, France almost did just that. And then the second thing is that no semi-final is won in the quarterfinal. And I think the Springboks are fully aware of that. So the England side haven't lost yet. They continue to build momentum. They get better each time they play, and South Africa will be incredibly wary of them.
I think we've lost Bob, guys. So Stephen and Nathan, I could probably arrange for you guys to speak to Bob separately. If he's not. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Sorry, I don't know why that disconnected. But that semi-final in particular will be a really, really difficult game to call. I think South Africa will prepare well. I think England will be waiting for them, and I look forward to that as a clash for the semi-finals.
Thank you, Bob. And Nathan, if you can just get your question in as well, and then we'll let Bob go.
Yeah, I think Stephen covered the question, but I mean, I didn't hear properly because he didn't speak about the other side with New Zealand and Argentina. Just a preview of that game, perhaps. Thanks.
Oh, no problem. Sorry, I started saying, and I'm not sure why it cut off. Apologies, but I started saying that I think not dissimilar to England, Argentina have been able to get through in I would say more under the radar than the other teams. They're now in a situation where they're taking on a team that they've recently beaten. They're taking on a team that they've started to build belief against, and they're taking on a team that has allowed them into the sort of recent winners circle. So they will have much more confidence than they would have in the past. And I think it really adds to the spectacle of that semi-final, because New Zealand were just absolutely amazing against Ireland. They had a 100% carrying record, 5 scrums, 0 to Ireland. I haven't seen those kind of stats in a match ever, which means that they made 0 handling errors. If New Zealand are in that kind of imperious form, then of course it'll be difficult for Argentina. But as we've heard from the Argentina coaching staff, and we know that there's a very famous Australian who likes to talk to the media every now and again, but he just said, we'll take it game by game, and we love the opportunity to take on one of the best teams in the world. So it's mouth-watering stuff into the next round of the World Cup. Looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bob, and just thank you to Martin for his time, and for everyone who has joined. We will be keeping the media roundtables going through the course of the season as per the last year, and enjoy the weekend's rugby. So thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.